Hey everyone, hope you're all well. Today I decided to watch the Halo Infinite campaign overview at 0.25x speed, just to see if there was anything you missed or anything interesting left to discover that you couldn't see at the regular speed. I was honestly blown away by the campaign overview. My hype for Halo Infinite has gone through the roof since watching it, but hopefully today I can show you some cool new things you might not have seen to get you guys even more excited about Halo Infinite's campaign. If you find yourself enjoying the video, a like and a sub would be much appreciated. With that said, let's get into it. The first thing I noticed is actually towards the start, when the pilot wipes the windscreen of the Pelican to discover Chief floating in space. It's a little hard to catch, but Chief actually deployed his grapple shot before getting stuck in space. I assume he was trying to grapple onto something like a ship and was unsuccessful, which is why the pilot finds him with the grapple already used. You can see this again when the pilot brings Chief inside and connects his suit to the Pelican, with the grapple still attached. That's really good attention to detail, and you'll notice that the inside of the Pelican is far darker here than before, which makes sense because the pilot's been stuck in space with no power. When the pilot powers up Chief's suit, you will see a night and day difference with the pilot's face, hands, and hair. It's nothing major, but it's still very clear to see the graphical improvements, and I'm sure you guys noticed that throughout the overview. In the following frames, Chief's Pelican flies over what appears to be a Banished camp with Marine prisoners. This exact spot is where Chief later in the overview saves the Marines from the clutches of the brutes, and decides to drive off the cliff, sending them all to their death. To me though, that's what Halo's all about. Then when Chief jumps out of the Pelican, the camera switches from third person during the cutscene to first, as Chief lands on the ground, beginning the start of a new mission. Can I just say that from this angle, the hexagonal pillars in the ground look fantastic and blend in really well with the terrain. Many people have already spotted this, but in the background you can see a destroyed Guardian, which is pretty cool. I'll touch on this a little later on. When the Forerunner door opens, we see a large Forerunner interior that has been taken over by the Banished, and the overall design of this room looks awfully similar to the Forerunner interior seen during the mission Regret in Halo 2. There are some obvious differences in design and general layout, but in my opinion they do share some similarities. We now move to some gameplay where straight away we can see an upgraded grapple shot with electricity that stuns the enemy. It seems very effective, and I'll get into the equipment upgrades later in the vid, but if you look in the bottom right corner of the HUD, you will see 4 equipment slots. During multiplayer you can only hold one piece of equipment, but in campaign you can hold any 4 types of equipment while traversing Zeta Halo. I think that's really cool, and it seems that the grapple shot is the only rechargeable piece of equipment that Chief has for the duration of the campaign. The other equipment, like the repulsor and thrust, have limited use, so that's something I wanted to point out. Now, something really interesting I noticed is that Chief flies right through the area from the 2020 gameplay demo. You'll notice that the destroyed frigate is on both sides of the Banished Banji, and you can also see a downed Pelican which is visible during the gameplay demo. My assumption is that this takes place before Chief and Brohammer crash land, due to the anti-air turrets in the area still being functional, or at least we can still see them on near the elevator. Chief's mission is to destroy the 3 AA turrets in the area once they crash land, so it seems to me that this takes place before that mission. I like how we can go back and forth between areas, very similar to Halo CE, and maybe grab different weapons and vehicles as we go. It really adds a lot of replay value to the game, and that excites me. Tied into that, we've got the forward operating bases where Chief can call in Unsc Vehicles thanks to the help of the pilot, and also call in different weapons and weapon variants. We only saw Chief scroll between a Mongoose and Wasp, but I'm sure we'll have the option to bring in the other Unsc Vehicles as well. In the background we can see 2 large Banished ships. This is the first time we see 2 of them together. Everyone just thought there was only one Banished carrier on the ring with Escharum and its forces, but who knows how many there are. It would be so cool to grab a Banji, board them, and take them down from the inside. Another small detail was that from afar you can see 2 small little objects that have come out of the Banished ship. To me, those small objects must be Banished Banshees, because once Chief gets in the Wasp, he flies for a bit and then encounters a Banished Banshee. So that's another cool detail, because the Banished Banshees must be coming out of those ships. I'll have to just add as well that watching the campaign overview at 0.25x speed made me appreciate the large scale of Zeta Halo that much more. I mean, these environments are just gorgeous, and they are so goddamn huge. It's so clear to see the large scale of these areas when the Wasp is flying around, and damn does the Wasp look good. When Chief approaches one of the Banished outposts in this Wasp, you can see the crazy amount of stuff just lying around. There are some Banished Wraiths that are either half finished or destroyed with the fins blown off. Still pretty cool to see. There's also a wheel rack for the chopper's wheels, which is another awesome detail. It would make sense that they put some of their vehicles together at these outposts, but we can also see a Banished built tunnel leading underground. I wonder what we'll discover inside. We then get a first glance at one of these sniper jackals, and something you may have noticed is that the stalker rifle it's holding has a red glow, or laser sight when zoomed in, so we'll be able to see where the sniper jackals are from a distance before they shoot us. So hopefully it won't be another Halo 2 situation during Legendary. Moving on, we can see some Marines standing their ground against the Banished as Chief flies overhead. It's really awesome seeing the Marines fight back against the Banished forces. I get some really strong Halo CE vibes just watching them fight. They are quite outnumbered, but with the Chief and a Banji picking off the opposing Banished troops, I'm sure they'll be right. Then we see what looks like the very first enemy in the campaign. Reason I'm saying that is because it looks like it takes place on the Banished ship that Chief lands on at the end of the first cutscene. I think we'll see Chief land on the ship and then walk around a corridor to find this berserk brute forcing its way through a door to rush Chief. It looks like an easy kill, and that could just be because it's on easy, but it'll be a way to get players on their toes from the get-go. It's clearly very early in the game, but I really do think this is the first enemy we will kill in the campaign. We can see in the background a hologram of Atriox when the brute goes berserk. I assume once we deal with this brute, we'll be able to get a closer look at Atriox in hologram form, which would be pretty insane since the Master Chief hasn't seen Atriox up close as far as we're aware. I know I'm lingering on this one brute, but his armor is something we haven't seen before, and he has white war paint on his face, which tells me he's a badass. Then we see Chief on the mountain when the Marines are held captive. What you'll notice is that the sniper rifle scope is back to normal, showing enemy heat signatures. It wasn't like that during the multiplayer flights, which might have been for balancing. Regardless, it looks really nice here. Something really interesting with the Marines is that they have a weapon outline when Chief faces towards them. It looks like we'll be able to grapple and steal the Marines' weapons, if we so choose, which could be hilarious if done right, and I hope they react to Chief stealing their weapon with some funny dialogue. Now, we already know Halo Infinite's AI are top notch, but this bit really surprised me when I saw it. As I zoom in on this jackal, watch what it does with its shield as the Master Chief gets close to it. It's really hard to catch, but the jackal rotates its shield to fire overhead. It's really fantastic to see how the jackal AI reacts to Chief, and I'm positive this will add more variety to jackal encounters during the campaign. As the Banished boss comes down the elevator, you'll notice that he's accompanied by two jackals, both sporting the red armor, so I think they're a higher class of jackals. What surprised me is that both jackals are holding the Mangler, which is pretty darn powerful, while the brute boss uses the Hydra launcher. It then cuts to a different boss, being Tremonius, who holds the Bulldog as well as the Hydra launcher. As Chief engages with Tremonius, you'll notice he does this brace animation, which many people believe to be some type of armor lock. This is not the case. While Tremonius braces, he still takes damage from Chief's melee. This animation is only performed by high-ranking brutes, as we can see another brute do the exact same animation as Chief drives his chopper over him. It decreases the damage taken for sure, but it's not a complete armor lock. Then Tremonius does what appears to be a ground pound on Chief, which I assume only bosses with the jetpack can do. The fight against Tremonius takes place right after retrieving the weapon. I was able to pause on a frame showing the mission name and objectives. The mission is called Foundation, where you first need to locate the weapon, then reach the surface, but before you can do that, you need to defeat Tremonius. So clearly this boss fight takes place very early in the game. Once the TAC map opens, we can see the main objective as well as the forward operating base in the area that Chief needs to claim for the UNSC. When the marker is over FOB Golf, you'll notice that both fast travel and ordnance are offline, simply because Chief hasn't defeated the Banished there just yet. Also, we can see it says fast travel offline in the bottom right corner. The icon for fast travel is a pelican, so players will be able to fast travel thanks to the pilot. This entire area has a lot of collectibles. There are skulls, data pads, rings, beam emitters, spinal cores for equipment upgrades, and a couple other collectibles that are hard to make out. It looks like there's some snow on a few of these high altitude areas, which is something Team 3 said we'd see in the game. As Chief approaches the Banished silos, he leaves behind a Banished Banji, which I find quite fascinating. It means we can approach these areas and outposts in different ways. I know I for one would take the Banji. The mission here is called Ransom Keep, for those wondering. One thing really cool I've noticed is that as Chief drives his chopper into the Banished compound, the Banished react by bringing the silos down, so the player has to manually bring them back up again to destroy them. I think it's a cool detail, but it is really easy to miss them going down. There's a tiny amount of purple blood when Chief kills one of the elites, but it looks like it doesn't linger on the ground. Good to see blood, but shame you can't spray the walls with it anymore. The upgrades tab looks quite simplistic in design, but I really like it. On the screen we can see 5 different types of equipment, being grapple shot, threat sensor, drop wall, thruster, and shield core, which is an enhanced shield module that increases capacity to 115% of base shield strength. I find it quite odd that the repulsor is missing. Maybe the player is yet to discover it, or the player may need to scroll down further. Still not too sure on that. With each upgrade, you'll notice a substantial difference when using that equipment piece. When the player upgrades the thruster to the escape thruster, it adds a personal cloak effect to it, lasting 4 seconds after activation. Once upgraded, you'll see a visor message indicating to Chief, but more importantly the player, that the equipment piece has been upgraded. Another small touch, but I really love that detail. Another graphical upgrade I need to highlight is the Elite Shield effect. It looks so clean now, and definitely needs some praise. There are some Unsc vehicles in the Banished compound near the Scorpion, and as Chief hops into the Scorpion tank, we can see a mongoose and a stack of warthogs, as well as parts of the Scorpion and wings of a pelican. The Banished scavenge and utilise whatever they can, and it's very obvious they scrap the vehicles for parts, which makes so much sense, and it's really great to see that in the game. I'm sure I wouldn't have noticed that while watching at a normal speed, as the player moves out quite quickly with the Scorpion killing everything in their path, so it's very chaotic. When Chief grapple jacks the Banji, you can see the Elite bang his head while Chief throws him out. I just found that quite funny because the Elite looks so dazed before pulling out his pulse carbine, and then of course, falling to his death. Also, you can see bloody space due to the fragments in the ring. I can't wait to push some brutes and elites over the edges. Then we move to the same area from the July demo. Now I very quickly want to touch on the flame effect accompanying the Banished drop pod, because it looks fantastic. Obviously the whole area has seen a massive upgrade in terms of detail, but I just like what 343 added here when the drop pod comes down. I'm sure you all noticed that, but you really get to see it in all its glory at 0.25x speed. I actually really recommend it. The skimmers look like a lot of fun to fight, and they seem either clumsy or stupid, because one of the skimmers accidentally shoots another skimmer. So I found that hilarious and just wanted to share that. Okay, Jaeger Odomni looks fucking awesome. That just has to be said straight away. When he deactivates his active camouflage, you can see a silent shadow red effect before he appears. God, he looks so damn menacing, and the red energy sword and smaller blade is just the icing on the cake. We move to the final foe being the Harbinger, who I'm really intrigued by. She holds these bowls of electricity when attacking Chief, causing him to go flying. I love the small detail of Chief's head touching a rock and just breaking it to pieces. When the Master Chief jumps off the tall foreigner structure into the Pelican, we get a closer look at the Guardian. But what's really interesting is that there also appears to be a ship right next to it. It looks oddly straight and long, and very well could be the UNSC Infinity. Let me know what you guys think. Does that look like the Infinity, or am I just tripping out? Would make sense in my opinion, as it would have been destroyed by now, and ramming a Guardian would be a sick way to go. So that was everything I found watching the Halo Infinite campaign overview in 0.25x speed. Let me know if you discovered some of these things on your own, or if you're more hyped after seeing something you hadn't before. Halo Infinite's campaign has really come a long way since we saw it last year. It's great seeing the positivity and hype return to the Halo community. But to wrap up, all I'll say is this: hope has been rediscovered. Now it's time to finish the fight.